Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Gotham Knights Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I think this is such an interesting take on the whole Joe Chill situation, because obviously he ends up always either being like a minor character, because I think typically Joe Chill is, I don't know like when that became a like more continuous thing that Joe Chill is the one who pulled the trigger on Thomas and Martha, but obviously it's always just been kind of like a, does that mean anything? Because I think Gotham's one of the last storylines, like the TV show, that I know kind of dived more into the person who killed Bruce's parents, and there being kind of more to it and everything like that, and they really leaned into it this episode too, especially because I guess it also gives you a range of how old Bruce was in this continuity, because it's like, oh, Joe Chill has been on death row for 50 years, so I was like, oh, so I guess, because I don't know how old Bruce typically is when his parents died, so I was like, is that implying Bruce is like mid-50s in this continuity? It's like, huh, I guess he's kind of like Ben Affleck, Bruce Wayne, I'd assume so. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I guess in my head I was thinking he maybe late 30s, maybe early 40s, you know, but I wouldn't have expected him. He's got to be in his mid 50s at best, because he had to be like, if not almost 60. I mean, that's just interesting to think about. Either way, tensions and all that aside, Joe Chill's execution is coming up, which is a situation where, I mean, to be fair, it's like even in real life, people sit on death row for years and years, but it feels like, considering who you are, considering you killed like one of the golden families of Gotham, you think people would have probably pushed that through a lot quicker. But it's like, yeah, his execution's coming up, and he's willing to talk to people because it turns out he got a coin from the court, but he doesn't want to talk to anyone except for Turner, which obviously the moment word gets out about that, it's like, well, Turner wants to go talk to Joe Chill, but it's like, that's obviously a trap. It could be like the court coming to get you. Could be like Harvey using this as an opportunity to grab you up too. It's like, yeah, but Harvey had plenty of opportunity to get us beforehand at that gala, but he didn't. He trusted us, and in particular trusted Turner, and didn't turn me or us in. So this is an opportunity to learn more about the court. So Turner meets with Harvey, and they go and meet Joe, and Joe knows that Turner didn't kill Bruce, just like he didn't kill Martha and Thomas. I was like, interesting. Like, I was like, because I was wondering, I was like, are they really going down this route? Are they making it so that, because a lot of times he's just a hired gun. He's the one who pulls the trigger, but that was kind of the implication, like, oh, someone else was behind that. And I thought it was so interesting, because he's like, right, I was hired to mug that family, but I had a gun on them, but it wasn't even a gun. The gun wasn't even loaded, is what I'm saying. But someone perfectly fired the shots from behind me. So from Bruce's perspective, especially as a child, the fact of the matter is, it seems like I'm the one that pulled the trigger. And for him, it's like a kid believing that I killed his parents. I can't fault him for that, but he's like, now knowing that event made Bruce Wayne Batman, I do put fault on that child, because he's supposed to be the world's greatest detective, and he couldn't see that I was being framed. But to be fair, it's like, it's understandable too, because for Bruce, it's like, this is his core trauma, and so for him, he's been playing it over and over again in his head, but also he was a kid at the time, so there's certain details he would have missed. And I mean, and I reference it all the time, but like the Telltale game, they really leaned into that, because Bruce, like, because this is like episode 2, I think, maybe, of, maybe it was like episode 2, maybe even episode 3 of the Telltale Batman, the first one, of Bruce going back down memory lane and remembering something from that incident that he didn't remember. Like, because obviously Falcone's name got dropped, and he didn't remember that. It's probably one of those things, but it's also like, right, it's such a core trauma that you play over and over again, but in your head, you probably still see the details that exact way because it's burned into your mind, because you only had your perspective. I mean, that's also the easiest way to get tunnel vision when it's something so close to you that you would only have your perspective on it. So, or who knows, maybe Bruce eventually did find out the truth about Joe. Who knows? It's unclear. But I can also understand Joe's perspective of like, you're supposed to be the world's greatest detective, and you never saw through that because he figured it was all said and done. Like, it's like, even if the court's behind it, he probably figured like, no, Joe's still the one who pulled the trigger on killing my parents, so I'm fine. I don't know. Who knows? We don't fully know what was in Bruce's mind, because maybe it has something to do with the pages. Maybe this how it ties back to Turner, especially with the whole aspect of the pages that Carrie ended up taking from the journal. Maybe there's some correlation, some connection in that regard, especially because I didn't realize that, like, that's even more of a thing of why Bruce connected with Turner, is because they were both the exact same age. Yeah, because that's what I was about to say. Like, now in retrospect, I was like, oh yeah, so he is super late 50. He has to, because I was about to say, like, I was like, isn't he like 8 years old? They even reference it because they were both 8. Turner was also 8 when he lost his dad, his parents too, if I remember correctly. So I'm like, oh, so he was like late 50s in this guy. Like I said, he was like older, like Ben Affleck Batman type of situation. So even older, in fact, I believe. So I just thought that was so interesting, knowing like he was like this late career Batman. I mean, if, obviously given a couple more years, we'd be easily in Batman Beyond territory. At least in some regards. But anyway, like I said, I'm going on a tangent. Obviously for Joe, it's like, I tried to tell anyone that would listen, but no one believed him. And so him and Turner are in the exact same position, because it's like, right, why would the court leave you alive all this time? And I guess it's like he made the perfect fall guy for it. So as long as he was around, but now it's like, because Turner and the others have been getting too close, meddling in the court's business, they're getting a little too close, that it's like, right, we need to start cleaning up all loose ends, especially the ones that have been straggling around for years, Because it's so interesting, too, because the way Joe put it, it's like what I represented for Gotham is kind of why the court kept me around, because he represented that chaos. Because even Duello is kind of like, oh my god, he's like the pinnacle of, like, he's kind of almost like the father of crime, because him doing what he did showcased to everyone that the people who sat at the top of Gotham's hierarchy could still get touched. Like, a prominent and powerful family like the Waynes could get gunned down, because the way she makes it sound, it's like he's like the first big, like, Gotham has its history, but I think he was like the pop off for what is now what it became the generation of crime in Gotham. Like, I guess it's like, right, you kind of were like the match that lit the powder keg, and I guess almost saying like every villain spawned up because every bad guy was like, whoa, Joe Chill set all emotions. So that's why Duella's kind of like almost like inspired by him in that regard. She's the only one that has that perspective on him. It's like, oh, cool. Good to see that you later on being like, wait, where's my Joe Chill autograph? It's like, well, I figured you wouldn't want it from an innocent man, which Duella was like, okay, you're buying into that, whatever. But it's like, yeah, I think maybe even she starts believing it by the end of the episode that he was innocent, that it is kind of like, huh. I mean, it's also kind of interesting, too, because, I mean, it's like your dad's in that same vein of, like, it's like Joe Chill kind of popped it off, but when we think Gotham supervillains, everyone thinks of her dad, which comes with its own issues and everything. But, yeah, circling back really quickly and finishing up everything with Joe Chill, he kind of told Turner the best option he had was to give up, that there was no stopping the court, because it's like, right, I would rather have a quick death than have you been spending the next 50 years of your life behind bars like I did. So it's kind of like, yeah, just like give up and leave this all behind. But for Turner, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. In fact, for him, it's like the difference between him and Joe is Joe had no one. Turner's not in this alone. He has an entire squad by his side. He's got Harper, he's got Cullen, he's got Duella, which very flaky at times. He's got Stephanie, and he's also got Carrie. So he's not in this alone. He has a team by his side, And I think that's also kind of probably like references like the difference between him and his dad too. It's like, other than like getting help from Carrie from time to time, he was still kind of doing the Batman thing, because it doesn't seem like there's no like Robin or, you know, any of the Robins, no Batgirl or anything in this continuity that we're aware of. So it just seems like he probably kind of went solo for a lot, except for the little help he got here and there, but he didn't have like probably a full consistent team. Probably like the only like real like team squad he had. Like, I don't know if they've referenced whether Lucius Fox exists in this continuity or not. Maybe he did, and maybe he's gone. I mean, they probably didn't want to retread that territory, just because obviously Luke is a major character in Batwoman, so maybe that's why they didn't really kind of go down that route. But obviously Alfred is going in this continuity. So, although Al Turner was dealing with that, the deciphering team, which includes Stephanie, Cullen, Harper, and Duella, which I love that Duella kind of did nothing for it. It's just kind of like, hey, let's drink some alcohol, and then as they're kind of drinking, and because Stephanie's kind of lamenting everything because she went to her dad because she couldn't decipher the code, but she figured her dad, being the person he is, it is so weird to see that he is such a big celebrity, but at the same time I'm like, well, that's no, I figured it's in the same vein as like an Alex Trebek or, you know, a Pat Sajak. So it's like no different in that regard. So I'm like, oh yeah, it makes sense. But it's also just that thing too of like, I guess it adds to that fall of grace, because we don't know what's going to eventually turn him into Clue Master. Once again, if he even goes down that route this series or not, but he kind of nudged her in the right direction. And I even love that Harper was the one that kind of figured it out, because Cullen reveals like, oh no, she like watches that like kind of religiously, and she kind of hits him like, dude, like don't tell her that, because her and, you know, Stephanie kind of have their thing back and forth, but it's also like, oh, you're I guess maybe that's also I mean, obviously she's made it clear her beef with Stephanie in the past, but also I think it's also interesting to know that you're a big fan, but I guess it's like, I'm a fan of the show, not and your dad, but not like the family name, and just, you know, it's just like, right, he's a good host, and it's a really interesting show that I really like. I mean, because, you know, I think it also, you know, leans into the fact as to how smart Harper is. So, but either way, they ended up tracking down the books. They figured like, right, this has got to be associated with a certain book, pages from a book, a certain word, and that's how we deciphered the message. But they had first tracked down the book that fit the criteria of just like, oh, it needed to have at least like 700 pages or something like that. Ultimately, Cullen's the one who ended up tracking down the book. They ended up deciphering it, which led them to an opioid situation. Later on, they see people packaging opioids and stuff, and it's like, even Harper being like, whoa, how'd you know immediately what that was? And because no one else questioned it except for Harper. But in that moment, like, Cullen backed up Stephanie and was kind of like, right, they wouldn't be packaging anything else and having all this, like, you know, like all these people if it was anything else. And you could tell that look on Stephanie's face, like, thank you. Like, I don't want to talk about my family circumstances, because currently Cullen's the only one that knows, because she hasn't even talked to Turner about it. So Duella wanted nothing to do with it, so she ended up leaving, but the rest of the squad went in and busted some faces up, like destroyed. I mean, obviously Stephanie had like even more personal motivation, once again, because Cullen's the only one who knows the truth. He knows what this meant to her, because for her it's like, because for Stephanie, she made a point that, hey, these opioids being out there, these will destroy so many lives, so we can't just, like, let them, like, hit the streets and stuff. So, and that's why she was, like, smashing them, because it just makes her realize, like, this has destroyed my mom. It's kind of destroyed my family. I mean, because we have no idea what her father's perspective is on this, because he's mainly at work. So we really don't know if he doesn't really get to see that side of things, like, kind of, like, the bad side of her mom. I mean, there's no good side to her mom's addiction, but, you know, like, how, like, it's like, things can be bad, but like some people can see the worst sides of them. So the worst sides of those situations. So maybe Stephanie's always seen the worst side of it, where her dad's only seen the bad side of things, you know? So maybe there's a correlation there, or maybe it's just he's always so busy with work that he doesn't see any of that too. So she, once again, has to grow up faster. She has to be the one that kind of ends up being responsible for her mom in so many regards and so many elements. So I mean, I think that's also why she probably like latches onto her dad as much as she does. Her first run with vigilantism didn't turn out that great, considering like she almost got killed, but you could also see her kind of looking in awe. And the fact of the matter is, everyone kind of ran straight head first into the whole situation, because she's like, yeah, I know how to fend, so I can take care of myself. But it's also like, obviously, like she froze the moment she had a gun in her face. It's like, well, the team has been in situations where they've had guns in their face and they've literally gone up against potentially 100-year-old assassins. So it kind of braces you to kind of take down some like street level thugs a little bit. So, but either way, obviously the whole experience ended up like shaking her to her core. But for Turner, he told her that obviously this is kind of where she belongs, especially because for him, he had told Joe Chill, like, everyone in his life, no one kind of batted an eye at the fact is that, hey, Turner killed his dad because of money and stuff like that. No one, like, even Harvey, like, had his doubts about Turner because of it. But the only person who didn't doubt him was Stephanie, and it's like, right, you've been there to kind of back me up, and me and this ragtag team of weirdos we've been joined up with. But it's like, yeah, like, I couldn't have made it this far without you. So, seems like stuff is, happening there, but, kind of gets called away at the last minute because of the whole Brody situation with what he's dealing with this episode. Because Harvey tried to talk to Lincoln because he knew, like, right, okay, so the coin is supposed to be, like, a mark of death. But as Joe Chill kind of put it, it's, like, more so like it's the court more so having, like, laughing and being like, yeah, we won. This is kind of supposed to be our victory lap. Even he's saying, like, to be fair, they basically killed the bat. So it's like, why wouldn't you be flexing and kind of going down, like, circling and kind of like, like enjoying your victory lap, essentially. So you took down what was kind of like your number one obstacle in the city. So. But the next person on their list is Lincoln, and it's like, well, now in the greater context, it makes sense why, because they want Lincoln out of the way because they're trying to put Harvey, like, however way they're controlling him, whoever's, like, fully behind that, it's unclear. Not unless we end up finding out it's, I was like, no, because Harvey and her hooked up, so it doesn't seem like she's behind this, because part of me was wondering, could it be a thing of she was, Brody's mom, if she was a kind of a part of this, because you were wondering at first, it's like, could Brody's dad and mom be a part of the court? But it's like, nah, the court kind of is able to kind of control Harvey, so why would it kind of make, or at the very least make him give into like his other side a little more? So why would they kind of set up that whole Harvey and her hooking up thing? But it could be a situation of they needed Lincoln out of the way because, hey, he's your main competition for becoming mayor, and they need you in that position. And maybe that's also why they had you two. I mean, not unless that was just Harvey giving into his desires, or did they want those two to hook up again, rekindling their flame because it's necessary? I don't know if that was connected to the Lincoln thing, or whether that was just like the mayoral ship situation they're trying to set up for Harvey, because the Talon shows up and tried to kill Lincoln. Luckily, he's stable later on, but, doesn't mean they still won't come after him to finish the job. Especially because Joe had specifically said, like, right, if you haven't gotten a coin from the court, they must have a role, they must have a reason for keeping you around. And the Talon proved that this episode when he had the perfect opportunity to kill Harvey, but he didn't. And so for Harvey, I think it's so frustrating, like, right, I wanted to try to do the right thing, but I couldn't. And also the Talon left me alive, so that means the court does need me for something. So I think all that, plus the whole Mayor Hero thing of it all, I think it's still kind of shaking him to his core. So because of everything between Carrie and her mom, obviously her mom is keeping kind of more tighter leash on Carrie. It's like, yeah, you're going to stay here with me at work, and I'm going to be able to keep an eye on you. Obviously Brody's kind of doing his kind of community service there, so he's helping out. And there's a guy that was like in really, really bad condition, and obviously it's like, oh, get Dr. Kelly, but she spread thin with so many other nurses, and I guess that particular hospital isn't getting the funding it needs, and they're like understaffed, and there's just too much. I mean, it's Gotham, so there's going to be people coming in all the time that are hurt, sadly. So it's a situation where Carrie and Brody work together to help this guy, and she ends up stitching the dude up. Because obviously she references, like, right, her mom let her do it in the past. Like, oh, I tried it on bananas. But it's like, have you done this before? And it turns out she's really good at it. It's like, well, we know she's helped Bruce before. So she might have, well, we know at least one time she probably, like, we know at least one time she definitely patched him up. So it might have been a regular enough thing that she's gotten enough practice on, like, human, like, you know. But it's like, yeah, don't tell anyone about this, but also especially don't tell my mom about it. Because I was like, yeah, that looks like that's a liability situation, just screaming like, oh, yeah, don't let anyone know that you did that because you could super get in trouble. But it's in her nature to want to help people in whatever capacity she can, so. But after what happened to Brody's dad, she ends up like hugging her mom later on, because I think it's a thing of, well, for one, I appreciate you, Mom, because the fact is you're a rock star doctor. I've always knew you were, but being able to save people's lives, but also, yeah, I think it put things a little more in perspective too, of like kind of, you know, holding on tight, because you never know what, like, your life can get flipped upside down. So I'm curious, will this whole situation lead to Brody becoming a part of the squad, just because he's kind of been on that very outskirts of all of this, but he's going to be drawn in because, well, his family was now drawn into all of this the moment the Talon or the court came after his dad. So I doubt Stephanie's going to tell him because of everything that's going on, but maybe she might feel the need to because of that. I don't know. I'm sure that's also going to leave Turner with some very, very complex feelings. But I think it's interesting too. Before I wrap this up, like talking about the duella of it all. Like I said, like that whole situation where she was back at, you know, the hideout and she was looking at the TV, and I guess the Joe Chill of it all, like him being executed, she's kind of like pouring one out for the homie, or like drinking one for the homie, the criminal homie of sorts. But I think it's also like, hey, the team came back, they're celebrating, like, yeah, we rocked it as the Gotham Knights. I mean, we left a signature and everything this time, and you know. But Duella makes the point of like, right, you'd be locked up just like the guys you beat up tonight to hand over to the cops. Like, you would be right beside them if the cops really knew who it was. So it's kind of like she's not embracing the. I mean, obviously, you out of anyone else would be allergic to, you know, vigilantism, considering who your pops is. But still, it is a thing. I mean, you know, just straight up being a criminal yourself. But it's also, I think for her, it's like, I'm not going to delude myself into being anything other than I am. Like, this isn't me trying to be a hero. I'm in this purely for survival. And you guys are just so steadfast in trying to get yourselves killed. So I think that's kind of like Duella's perspective on it. So even she's kind of still on the outskirts of the rest of the team who wants to kind of do the more heroic thing. Especially in Turner's case. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.